Welcome to the QBC podcast, where we explore new paradigms in health and science that have a meaningful impact on our day to day lives. I'm your host, Meredith Oak, a curious coach and mom. I started a journey to overcome chronic fatigue and found myself in a whole new quantum universe. I believe new research shouldn't stay locked away in an ivory tower, and that wisdom can be found in many places and understood by all of us. To keep in touch with this podcast, the QBC free community, our episode guide, and all the show notes, please visit qbcpod.com, qbcpod.com. Let's get together to create the future we all want to live in. Okay, you guys, the guests on my show today are making something that is so super cool. I don't even know what to say. It's like the craziest thing. And I have to say, Peter Vito and Liliana Lettieri, who are my guests today, have been working on this for a couple of years. They've been on my radar. And, we even did a deep dive with them in QBC Pro, deep into their science. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say I was sort of paid attention to what they were talking about, but not really until I decided to have them on my podcast and I started really looking at what they were making. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a new kind of screen. All right, that sounds good. Like, yeah, for sure. And then I started to research what exactly these guys are doing. And it's crazy. I'm like, what? How are we not all so super excited about this? Okay, so when I explain it to you, you're going to get really excited. It's not available yet. They're still, building out the prototype and working on getting their company going. But what they've done is they've created a monitor, so a screen that can be used for attached to any computer. You could use it as a television. It's a monitor that is lit. The light coming out of it is sunlight. Yes, correct. The monitor emits sunlight. The sunlight is collected outside, travels through a fiber optic cable, and comes out of the screen. Like, what? So now we're not trying to mitigate we don't have to do all these hacks to mitigate the toxic light coming out of the screen. The light coming out of the screen could actually just be sunlight. Yes. We still want to go outside and do all of those things. But what if the time that we did have to spend on a screen was good for us? Like, it's crazy. And this thing actually works. It's real. So I'm going to let them get into it and explain the story of how this all happened. Liliana and Peter both have PhDs. Peter has a PhD in psychophysics, and Liliana is more cross-disciplinary. She studied a lot of different kinds of sciences. So this is one of those situations where it's like, as with anything that is working in the world today, it's interdisciplinary. It's abolishing silos. It's people with different backgrounds coming together and going, what if we did this? What if we tried this? Peter's really focused on the science and Liliana is building out the business. And I couldn't be more excited to support them in that endeavor. So enjoy this conversation. In the meantime, since a sunlit screen is currently not in any of our living rooms or on our desks or on our tables or on our screened-in porches where I currently am, we still should be mindful of how we use them and, download all the filters for during the day. That's what I do. People are like, why are you wearing you don't wear blue blockers during the day? I use the iris filter and during the day. And then in the evening, if I need to be on a screen or I'd like to watch a movie or a TV show with my family, I put on the blue blockers, which I get from bondcharge.com, our partner on this podcast. So if you are using a screen and you don't have blue blockers, you should really go get some. The code is QBC at checkout for a discount. And now back to the future of screens with Liliana and Peter.
Peter Vito, Liliana Latieri, welcome to the QVC podcast. I'm really excited to have you both here. For people who don't know, I mean, I just will have said it in the intro, but you're working on some really exciting technology that literally brings sunlight into our computer monitors. So we're going to get into it, but I first want to ask how you both arrived at this project. It's in some ways seems so intuitively correct, and in other ways is just completely cutting edge and mind blowing that you're doing this. So, love to hear how you ended up making a sunlight fueled screen.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of my background because I think in context, maybe it makes a little bit more sense about how I met up with Peter and why it all made sense to me immediately. So I was trained in biology. I worked looking at organisms and how they signal and use color and light to interact and to survive in their specific environments. So, what I learned was all about vision and how colors and wavelengths move through the environment in very specific ways and in specific channels. And, what we tend to think of as color is, based on our categorical way of using light to interpret our environment with our specific cones, right? But bees or mantis shrimp or birds, they all have very different ways of interpreting their environment. So that's sort of always been an understanding. And then I eventually moved into the business world, into signaling in a very different way in home electronics, consumer electronics, and learned about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and how data is brought in to your home and signaled throughout the environment. And so that's sort of where I came to this understanding when I reached sort of my health awakening, if you will, that then brought me to meet Peter.
That is so fascinating. And of course, what strikes me first is, and I find this with everybody who has deep insights in this field, is that there's almost always overlapping fields that aren't necessarily ever supposed to, under normal circumstances, talk to each other. So in
Right.
your case, you were looking at biology and specifically how insects see, and then you moved into a job that required you to understand how we receive technology into our lives and our homes.
Right. So it was actually fishes, believe it or not. So I was actually setting up things to measure light and communication with color underwater in big
Oh, fish.
contraptions
Okay.
and building rigs, that would hold a camera and taking measurements with little underwater contraptions and trying to figure out how organisms communicate to each other in the ocean. So then, moving into technology, it's a whole new world, but to me, it all interconnects very much. I mean, I was trained as an interdisciplinary scientist. I took
Okay.
classes with chemists and engineers, and the whole idea was to sort of like bring these fields together, learn how to talk to one another in a way that's not so filled with jargon that you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. That I can see that you're very smart, but I don't understand what you're what you're speaking about. So we learned to talk to one another, in a common language, and I think that has served me, down the road to be able to talk to people from different fields and understand that we're tackling the same problem, but from very different, expertise. So
Oh, I love that. And, I really think that, yeah, this siloing of science and research and even
yeah,
industries, you have like the FTC regulating EMFs, and they don't like, what did the FTC know about biology? Like they're meant to decide, make business decisions, right? Like, so this siloing has been hugely detrimental, I think, to civilization. So I love that you're weaving things together and doing it in a way where you can talk about it publicly. My soapbox right now is that science needs storytellers.
Yeah.
Everyone I talk to, it's like, I know we're just at the beginning of understanding things, but there's so much science there. Like there's so much. And I think a lot of people, myself included, have kind of labored under the belief that once there's enough science to prove something, we'll just all magically know.
Right. We'll just
We'll
all
just
get
shift
it.
to the new right thing. And I'm like, oh no, that's not how it works. So, okay. So Peter, tell us your way into this world.
Yeah, to connect to all of this beyond the interdisciplinary background, of course, to Pixan and also to what we do, which is similar in that sense to that of Liliana's. The other common thread, I believe, is the personal involvement or having had the experience of health issues which relate to light and how increasing exposure to daylight can help with that. And otherwise, I was also a researcher first. So before 2020, I was a researcher in psychophysics studying human vision and perception, starting with electro.
Okay, sorry, hang on. What is psychophysics? Tell us more about that. That's cool.
Psychophysics is basically measuring something in physical reality and using that as a stimulus, and then measuring on the other end of the interaction something in the psychological realm. So how animals or humans, in my case, react to that. Basically, my main topics were around vision, so how we see things. And first, it started with electrophysiology, so EEG and EMS, which is measuring electric waves from outside of the skull, so electric activity of the brain. And then TMS is using electromagnetic pulses to induce some activity in the brain. But then I moved on to psychophysics, which is kind of leaving this middle ground of the messy neuroscience part out and measures on what is more tangible. And so that came in my career, I think, more just accidentally. But looking back, I'm very, very grateful for that because it brought me much closer to whatever is pragmatic. So measuring really reality and not just trying to figure out through some modeling what's going on inside. The biggest issue there being with all the neuroscience stuff is that no one really understands what the brain does. So that's how I got to vision and action as well. So I was using their eye tracking, pupillometry, motion capture, stuff like that.
Okay, so I heard some interesting things in your answer as well, which is that a lot of brain science is done based on modeling and you prefer to work on actual observations, which I think is, also really in the wheelhouse that we're all operating in, which is like, how does this science going to help people right now? Like, what choices can I make in my life, in my day-to-day life, that's going to help me right now versus, just funneling it into research that never quite bridges into real life. And it's interesting. YouTube served me up a video just yesterday of some neuroscience guy who was like, well, psychology and philosophy are fine, but it's really neuroscience because now we know that this part of the brain does this and this part of the brain. I'm like, you don't know anything. Shut up, you and your 28 million views on YouTube. But it's interesting to me, the certainty with which people can convey things that they've studied that aren't, really necessarily the whole story at all.
Absolutely. And the other thing that connects to here with what you said is that we know plenty enough to do better in lighting, in displays. So looking for impact, I was thinking, I could do some more research and write papers, which will be read by a few more academics, and that's it. But actually, we know plenty enough to know how it can be done better. And of course, daylight being the optimal light source, it just really seemed trivial. But also, again, from personal experience and other backgrounds to how Pixan came to be, But this is one of it that it's always cool to know more and to dig into mechanisms. But if we can see which light source works better for people, that's a very simple thing. And I think we know plenty enough about that to know how we could do better.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, oh, this is clear. Like, let's make some practical changes to the world. So tell me about your personal health story that led you to this and your epiphany about daylight.
In my case, this started really in 2018. I was a postdoc at Cambridge and working mainly in a dark lab. So for these vision experiments on humans, we of course need a controlled light environment, so it's all dark with electric lighting and mainly display. So that's where I spend most of my day. And when I was not there, my office setup was really not very ergonomic. So the only chance I had to place somewhere a desktop monitor was right in a west-facing window. So it was always sunny when I got to that point in my day to use it. And I had to block the window and block the sun completely. And so that's when I was starting to think that I could just get rid of the backside of the monitor and use the sunlight for that. And meanwhile, because of more work and other issues, I also had increasing symptoms of light sensitivity. And I was looking for answers for that, which my profession really couldn't give. Again, it's not interdisciplinary enough so that lighting research would be connected enough to basic vision science, which the latter, of course, was my field at that time, let alone to anything that has to do with light physiology. And so that's when I started to learn more about this and realize that this is about so much more than vision.
So the requirements of your job where you were in darkness a lot during the day, is that right? And then in front of your computer so you had like dark mornings, computer lit afternoons. Is that that was the setup of your life and then started to take a toll?
Yes, definitely. Yes. And when I could have had a sunlit office space, I had to block the sun to even be able to see the monitor.
Okay.
So I was thinking if I could channel the sun into the display, that would help with both problems.
Wow. I love how your brain works. So what were some of the symptoms that you noticed when you were living a life where you had darkness for the first half of the day and then computer monitor light in the second half of the day? How were you feeling physically, mentally? Like, what was going on?
I think I have always had some sensitivities, and especially for light sources which are weird. And that really started with car headlights a little earlier when LED headlights started to become more popular. And I realized that I no longer enjoy driving at night, and it took some while to even figure out why. And obviously that means that my symptoms were not so severe. But then this got much worse when I spent more time indoors, more time in front of computer screens, and that then connects to headaches, all sorts of other issues, and just eye strain in general, with various symptoms. Part of that can also be temporary myopia, which I experience periodically, which is interesting because in my adolescent years, I was myopic. And then I kind of successfully trained myself out of it because I was lucky enough to be sent to a more forward-thinking ophthalmologist who didn't just prescribe sunglasses, but also gave exercises and good advice, which in my case worked.
Wow.
But I guess I'm still myopic in the sense that the symptoms can come back. And so displays can induce temporary myopia in many people. And it's still a somewhat open question how much that translates to longer term myopia. And it seems to do translate to some degree. And in my case, that is also part of the symptoms that I can experience. So I guess there are these flashbacks of blurry vision. Even though normally I don't have it, I don't need glasses any longer, even for driving.
Wow. So you were having headaches and eye strain, and your myopia was getting worse.
Yes, that's right. And I never have had
And then
otherwise,
when you
so.
changed when you changed your lighting environment to get more daylight during the day, what happened?
Yeah, so these got pretty much fixed through just more
all went away.
awareness of how to organize my day and how to be exposed to daylight, increasingly starting from the morning, because I was especially then more sun sensitive as well. So it really needs to start gently and with daylight, and that just helps and reduces all the sensitivity symptoms also to bright sources, including headlights. And it doesn't go away. And who knows why that is the case, really. I don't think we understand why some people are sensitive to LEDs and others not. There are many aspects to this, but
Yeah.
at least you can reduce the symptoms by just being more aligned to nature.
Yes. And that's true. A lot of the time when I talk to people about this, they're like, oh, I can't go outside. Like, it's too bright. My eyes are, and that's actually a symptom of not being outside enough. So what you're saying is you went out, you started early in the morning before it's like super, super bright and then gradually adjusted. Seems like a good way to do it.
Exactly. This is huge. And
Yeah.
so many people say that, oh, the sun is stronger now than it used to be. And as children, they were, whatever, playing outdoor all day long, and it didn't burn them. And it doesn't even occur to them that it's not so much probably the sun that changed, but they have.
Right. It's, their environment, their indoor environment has changed, which has made us more sensitive to our outdoor environment. Liliana, what's your story of coming to understand how important light is and natural light is in terms of overall health?
Yeah, so I would say after about a decade in academic research, which was many times in labs and very controlled lighting environments and indoors largely, and then transitioning into the business world where I was often on calls with international teams before sunrise and then after sunset, and just, a lot of screen time, a lot of indoor office spaces, and a lot of exposure to different communication uh, varieties. I started to experience sort of weird metabolic related symptoms, and I sort of first attributed it to, oh, it seems like it's maybe early menopause, early perimenopause, and, hot flashes, night sweats, headaches, insomnia, dopamine dysregulation, just all kinds of weird things that, if I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, you're just getting older. That's normal." And I sort of took that as the accepted storyline at the time, and then it started to really feel like this isn't quite. I don't really feel like this is the root cause. This isn't really what's happening. So I started to really do some more research, and when I started to learn more about this, the circadian science, and really started to, recognize and make the connection between like, oh, my natural environment is very unnatural. And so maybe I need to really realign. And so when I started to do that, these symptoms started to go away on their own. And and then it was like the light bulb really went off, and I was like, okay, I really need to learn a lot more about this. And I really started to piece together that, well, two things that one of the things that I had been attributing to just general, getting older and perimenopause was really mitochondrial energy loss. That was really what was at the root of my symptoms. And the more that I did things to give my cells what they needed to be able to recharge and repair, those symptoms just went away. And the other thing that I really learned was that there was a lot of screen time in my life, and that it was a huge part of the stressor that would trigger when I would struggle with the symptoms. So, yeah.
Wow. And did you connect back to when you'd done your work with animals and how
Yeah,
everything about them was based on their environment? And then it's
totally.
like, but for us,
But
we're
for
like,
us,
oh, whatever.
yeah, we're
I'll just be on Zoom 9 hours a day. It's
right.
fine.
Yeah, exactly. It was like it all just came right back, and I was like, oh, our microhabitat is completely different from the microhabitat that we had 150, even 200 years ago. It's completely different. And within that microhabitat that has a very different light structure, let's say, if you're to see what's around there, the wavelengths and the intensity of the light and all of that is completely different. And then within that, we're also additionally bombarding our eyes with a very, very specific cue that even though we don't see it in our eyes because it's not necessarily in the visible wavelengths, our cells are feeling it. Our bodies are feeling it. They are getting that signal through our eyes, subconsciously, invisibly, secretly, whatever you want to call it. The body is aware of it, even though we as, organisms with a fancy eyeball that has some very fancy cones and rods that can help us attune to our environment. I think what we often forget is that there's so much information flying around on so many channels. And in order to survive, we as organisms, every organism, we actually have to filter out a lot of information. And that information is filtered out to help us survive, right? We there's only so much information we can process. But when that happens, I think we as humans with our big fancy brains, we start to think, well, this is just all I need to pay attention to is what I can see and what I can perceive, and everything else doesn't matter. Or everything else that I don't need to pay attention to becomes inconsequential. When the reality is our bodies are very attuned to everything going on around us.
Yes. Yes. And when you start to look at it from the subatomic level, which we can't see at all, but we know exists, it's like those frequencies are like tractors driving through the living room to our cells.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how did you connect with Peter and decide to like fully shift into this as your main thing?
Yeah. So Peter and I met when I was starting to look for just other people in the community who were doing something that I felt like I could believe in. Like I felt like I had been in this consumer electronics world for almost a decade. I had really, shifted my awareness to be like, this stuff is killing us. We need to
Right.
do this tech better. Literally coworkers who had, been very healthy, gone to the gym, they did all the things, started to drop off because they had cancer and they had to, just leave. So, it was time for me to really look for something that made more sense to me professionally. And so when I met Peter, he had already developed this amazing technology. And I immediately was like, I know how to build these things because this is what I do for my job. I was project managing, building electronics that go in people's homes, working with the factories, working with the engineering teams, making sure it's got all the features and all the parts that we need to get it out there. And when we had our first conversation, I was like, I think we can do this. Like I think I can help. I can bring something to the table here. So yeah, it was exciting.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so you brought all of that valuable experience and knowledge and understanding of supply chain things and all that, all that stuff.
All that fun
Good
stuff.
for you. All that stuff that makes me like, good night. But yes, it's very important if you want to make things. I totally, I value that. So you brought that to the table, and then Peter brought the technology, and I love this story. So Peter, it's like one of those aha moments. You're sitting in your office. You've started to understand how important natural light is. You realize that you're blocking out the sunlight coming through your western facing window in order to see your monitor. And you're like, wait a minute. What if the sun was the light source for the monitor? Like, so good.
Thank you. Good summary.
What
You said it
happened?
much better than
Okay.
I did.
So you had this epiphany, and then what'd you do?
Yeah, and then
You built
I
it?
started to experiment, and I started with how many others have to remove the backside of an LCD to somehow gather daylight directly and channel it into the display. And first I wanted to use louvers, and that was an idea with which I experimented with and realized that in some cases it might work, but it will never work for any broader use case. And even in a single use case, it so much depends on the angle of the sun, which keeps changing throughout the day. And later, Izai, a small startup, did a product which did something extremely similar, but instead of louvers, they just had the backside of the display to open, and then you can change that angle to hopefully channel more light from whatever direction, maybe from a window, into the display. And it kind of works, but not really. So they also, for their next round of products, immediately they moved on to RSCD, which is then what Hisense and SunVision Display and Daylight Computer and all the others are doing. But nobody has really managed to get this daylight collection to work properly. And then as a next stage, I thought, okay, we have to concentrate sunlight. So I started with larger Fresnel lenses to collect light from a larger surface in the window and channel it into the display, and maybe to try to direct them with lens arrays, which can change the direction of daylight. But of course, again, daylight is very diffuse and it keeps changing its angle with the sun. So then soon I realized that this is the same situation, just a little better. It might work, but definitely not in all the cases where I want it to work. And even then, you need to be in the window or very close for this to work. And then meanwhile, I moved back to Germany. I was doing another postdoc at Ulm, and I got some help from an optics professor at Uni Stuttgart. And then it slowly became clear that really the way to do this properly is to collect daylight outside and use a fiber optic cable to channel it indoors. And then you can use it anywhere. And then you can use it in the basement, in a windowless office, anywhere. And it's going to be an intense light source, because the issue with all the displays is that you need much more light than what you have just from a reflective surface of the same size of your display, because it needs to pass through so many layers to give you the colored image. And because of that, any reflective display, any other daylit technology will always look much dimmer than if you just place a white piece of paper next to it. So generally they are too dim. And that's also why the image quality has to be low for it to work. But if you can concentrate daylight, then you can achieve all the visual qualities of regular desktop monitors while using daylight, so while also offering all the health benefits and comfort benefits of anything that is daylit. And so that's when it really started, 2019, I guess. And the first prototyping, of course, then many iterations came, but that's when the concept started to solidify.
Okay. So I heard you describing this on another call, and you were like, oh, yes, all this technology, we just do this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a minute. Did Peter just say that he's got a cable channeling sunlight into the monitor? And so the light coming out of the monitor is full spectrum sunlight. I know you mentioned you blocked UV, but other than that, like, is that what's happening?
Yes, it is. And of course, it's not my invention. So these tools have existed.
This seems like amazing.
No. So,
sorry, you were okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
these tools have existed for 60 years or more. The thing is that they have a very niche market because they compete with Windows. So daylight in the space is much cheaper and simpler if you just use Windows or even light tunnels. But for a display, they cannot work. And that's why they are very useful. So I guess I just connected to two fields. And then what needed to be engineered by us, and the proprietary part, is the backlighting architecture of PixSun. So how do you deal with a very intense and small light source and spread that light evenly on the back surface of the LCD, while of course also having an electric light source, because you need that whenever sunlight is not available, and to have a standalone, fully usable display also for the nighttime.
Okay, this is just really crazy to me. So Liliana, how would you explain what's happening here, and how did you first wrap your head around it? Because I hear Peter saying like, oh, there's been versions of this technology where you put sunlight through a cable. really? There has? And like, could people use that to light their basements? But I'll hold that question. Let's just stay focused on this on this monitor for now.
Yeah. So when Peter first explained it, I also kind of had to ask a few follow-up questions. I was like, wait a minute, so you're powering the monitor? He's like, no, not with solar panels, solar collectors. So it's, these lenses that are collecting and then concentrating light and then using fiber optics, which is, in the communications world, that's what we use to bring in data instead of photons necessarily. But the fiber optics are the same, right? I mean, my mind immediately went to, oh yeah, people used to put satellite dishes on their homes, to collect information, and then, we use fiber optics to bring data into our homes, and then we connect it to our little, so it was like all the pieces made sense to me. But when he said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's what we should be doing. We should be
Oh,
using
yeah.
the sunlight to backlight the monitor, because the monitor has these very, very narrow wavelengths that are only in the visible. We're missing all of that, beautiful restorative, regenerative part of the spectrum, the part that you go out, early in the morning to collect, to get everything going and healing. And, people are now using photobiomodulation because we know that we're infrared deprived. And we know how to use fiber optics. We do it all the time. We call the cable guy to come, like
Yeah.
it's not,
Well, I was just like, my brain is exploding here. Okay. So we're just, instead of the information that's bringing in our HBO or whatever, we're switching to photons, which are information.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So if I put one of these monitors in my house, how does it work? Do I put something outside that connects to it?
Yeah, so there'll be a solar collector that would have to be placed somewhere, obviously, where it can collect sunlight and, have access to, sun at different parts of the day. And then a fiber optic cable would run, similar to how, you use conduits to run fiber optics when you have the guy come out and fix up your home network. And then wherever you want your monitor to be, that fiber optic will then connect to this monitor through, a regular looking cable. You plug it in just like any other monitor. And then throughout the daytime, you're just using sunlight. And then as the sun sets, and if you need and want to, as many people do, need to use their monitor during the nighttime, we're still using LEDs, but just filling in that spectrum. So it's more of a sunlight, broader spectrum of light, so that you're still getting some of those healing wavelengths. But during the day, you're saving energy, you're getting all the healing stuff. The win-win.
Wow. And then the lighting that you've put in there at night, you've actually taken into account the biological impact of it.
Right. Right.
Okay, this is really crazy. So what if you wanted to have like a lot of monitors? Do you just set up like a cable?
Yeah. So there are many sizes of solar collectors that can, concentrate enough light to run to, you could go from one fiber optic cable up to probably 20. So, depending on if you're an enterprise, that wants to just have one massive solar collector and hook it up to a bunch of monitors and maybe some light sources too that can be task lights. That's possible too. You can use it for task lighting. You can use it for ambient lighting. I mean, you've talked to some pretty amazing, lighting designers now who, they all are aware of this need for different types of lighting, and our monitor is arguably another type that we use to work, we need to work with. And it's not a light bulb, but it's a light source going into our eyes
Yeah.
and helping us work and helping us do our lives. So
Yeah. And right now, I mean, very few of us have a life where we don't need to be on the computer sometimes or want to be. mean, I love doing this. Here we are. But everything involved with the computer, I'm continuously mitigating its effects on my biology. So like right now, I don't have blue blockers on, but I have the iris filtering, on one of the settings that's filtering out some of the harsher blue light. So Peter, what you've created is a monitor we don't need to hack it because it's actually, the light coming out is actually good for us.
Exactly. Mitigation is the right word.
We don't, the blue blockers and the filters and all that.
Yeah, we have so many products to mitigate. And that just shows that there is a problem, right? That none of them truly work, because that's why we have to keep using them, and still it only solves the problem to some people, partially because digital eye strain itself can come from so many causal pathways. So some people have issues with the spectrum, some people have issues with the flicker, and it's very hard to figure out which one hurts you. And then there are all the invisible physiological aspects there. And then there are many visual aspects as well, which go beyond just mere color vision. And so all of these together, you cannot mitigate for everything. That's great, because now we have a huge choice of various surrogate products which really try to mitigate, and people try to choose whichever suits them, but nobody can really tackle the root cause, because that's not fixed until you actually change the light source. So if you filter out blue light from an anyway very choppy and limited LED spectrum, then all that you have left is an even narrower part of even just the visible spectrum, right? And that's why all the colors turn orange, which is just a color issue. With a better, broader spectrum light source, even without any blue light, you could have much better colors, which we do as well for the night mode. I'm happy to go more into details, but just to finish the previous thought, that cannot add back to the spectrum what is missing. And then to add to the spectrum, let's say some infrared light, many people use extra desktop lamps next to the monitor. But again, that doesn't really account for all the issues with the monitor, with the flicker, with the other spectral problems. And it doesn't even necessarily reach those parts of the retina where it needs to reach, because you are still looking at the monitor. So the fovea is always doused in the light that comes from the display and not from anywhere else. And this is, by the way, also an issue when you have a properly ambient daylit room. The vast majority of the receptor cells in the retina will be still doused in the light from the display and not from the room, because the display is designed in such a way that it doesn't reflect ambient light. That's why you don't have glare and reflection. So that's important for the display. But since you are looking at around the center of the display and it's kind of large, the vast majority of the retina receives that light and not the daylight, which might be in your room if you are lucky otherwise.
Right. So even if you have the window open and you have a light box nearby supplementing the spectrum, if your eyes are focused on the screen, you're still mostly ingesting that.
Yes.
And so it's also interesting what you were saying about there's multiple factors like flicker, which are, these filters aren't accounting for. And I think that's interesting because I have personally noticed I get these headaches on and off. And I do all the things, right? Like I do all the things and I'm like, what are these headaches? So I went to see my chiropractor and I told her, like I showed her where it was like on each side at the base of my skull. And she's like, those are the muscles connected to eye strain. And are you spending a lot of time on your computer? And I'm like, yes. Well, some days, yes, some days, no, but I do all the things. But what I'm hearing you say is that there are so many layers to it. Like it could be the flicker. It could be that maybe I need to wear my reading glasses and I'm not.
Yes.
What are your thoughts as an eye strain expert?
Well, I'm certainly not an eye strain expert, but thank you. Yeah, and of course I didn't want to say that it's not better if you can have the window open or can have some near-infrared source nearby. And a very interesting tie to Scott Zimmerman's work, which you have certainly presented here many times, that also the sclera collects and channels near infrared to the back of the eye. So obviously some near infrared will reach also the fovea, but it's still different than if that is the light source that you are looking at, right? Because and especially the
Yes.
larger the monitor, the more it will block out basically the rest of your visual field in this spectral sense. Now, near infrared is also not focused so precisely on the retina, so there is definitely some scatter and some mixing there. But again, this is mitigation instead of having the right light in the most impactful lighting application that we have, because displays are the only lighting application where the intended use is to look directly into the light source. And we do that for several hours every day. So it is really a concentrated and impactful application. And that's why I don't think we should look so much at even energy efficiency, though obviously using daylight also saves energy, but that should be secondary because it's a little amount of light, but going to the most impactful places.
Right. So yes, of course, yeah, for sure, it's better to have the window open in the supplemental. But when, and that's a really good point. It's like screens were designed for us to stare directly into them, unlike light bulbs, and yet they did not take the physiological effects of that into account at all. Like not at
Not
all.
even as much as regular light bulbs. So even regarding color rendering, displays would never be acceptable as a light source for general lighting because they have this narrow RGB spectrum optimized for the color spaces that we use in the online world, which is great. And the eyes are very easy to fool in that regard. So we can create a huge number of colors that way, and perceptually it works very well. And actually, based on all the metrics that lighting uses, this way, a modern display with high resolution should not be any different from reading a book. But then why do we have all the digital eye strain, right? So that's the real issue that in the lighting world, nobody really wants to look at. Probably nowadays a little bit more. The trend is definitely changing. But traditionally, the assumption was that all of this doesn't matter. But then it flies in the face of the fact that so many people are struggling with displays and not with reading a book. The only difference is the light.
Right. Liliana, what thoughts?
No, I don't think I have anything to add. I mean, I think Peter said it beautifully.
Okay, so is there a version of this where we could get it, where we could have this work on a television?
Absolutely, it's the same technology. Yes, the TVs, digital whiteboards, even VR headsets could work the same way.
I mean, this is really crazy because I think like a foundational premise that people who listen to this podcast anyway have is that our screens are they're just bad for us, and all we can do is minimize our use and mitigate what's coming out of them and do our best to work around it. This is like a bit of a shift into the idea that there's a way to do it. I'm not like advocating we should have more screen time in our lives, but we all are going to have some at this point. So this is really a shift to think about, oh, it could actually be not bad for us.
Yeah.
Is that where you got to, Liliana?
Absolutely. And even now, just thinking of so many, elder care facilities, medical facilities, children in schools that don't have windows. I mean, there's so many ways that, people that don't have access to sunlight to the extent that they need it, and they either need to be in front of a screen for whatever amount of time, or the screen could just, be a tool to bring them the sunlight that they need to a place that, that's removed from the natural environment. I mean, there are, you could go, bunkers, you could go, but like, it doesn't need to be that extreme. It could just be an office space or a medical facility where somebody, they're not mobile enough to go outside and get the morning sun, but they can sit up in their hospital bed and, watch TV or whatever and get that beautiful sunlight into their eyes, their brains, their skins, their cells.
This is amazing. Okay, so where are things at You know, like, can we order these right now? Can I go buy, like, can we go buy one?
Not yet, but we're working
Okay.
really hard to get there. So we have some really amazing prototypes, and we are currently talking to some promising manufacturing partners and currently fundraising, to get that pilot build. I think we're gonna need a minimum order of at least a few hundred, if not 1,000. That's our goal in 2026 is to be able to build at least a few hundred and get them out to people. Hopefully with any luck, we'll be able to do pre-sale to let people know, look, this is when they're going to be available. You can get yours now, and we'll deliver it in 6 months or whatever that turns out to be. So yeah,
Okay, so amazing. So how can we help? Like, can people get on your wait list?
absolutely. Yeah. The most impactful way that any listener can help is honestly just to sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, on Instagram, on YouTube, LinkedIn, if that's your social media of choice. And it's really spreading the word and getting people excited and talking about it, is the biggest help. Like I said, we're talking to investors and raising money, raising capital right now to be able to do that initial production run. But the best way for us to show investors that there's excitement and there's traction and that people want this is to have engagement and followership and people signing up and visiting the page and watching the demo video and
Okay, well,
engaging.
we are all in. Okay, we have a mission. We have a mission, friends.
Yeah,
Let's get
yeah,
we would all really love to have this become an option in the world, if not at some point the default option.
yeah,
So what is the website to sign up? Is it Pixin?
yeah.
Okay.
www.pixun.co.
.co. Okay, so that's Pixun, Pixun.co, and we'll put links in the show notes, and we'll do shout outs. And I mean, obviously, people in this community are going to be really excited about this. For those of you who are members of QBC Pro, Peter and Liliana did a very deep dive into the science. I know some of you really, really like that. Keep it a little more high level on the podcast so we don't scare away the new people. We like you, new people. Welcome. Come on in. The water's warm in the circadian world. But yes, I want to make sure, because I know, Peter, you have a lot of deep science behind this. So if that is of interest to you, make sure you're in the QBC Pro membership. That video is in there. Okay, well, I am so grateful that you two are doing this. Thank you. Truly. I've just been noticing lately, we all play a different role. Some of us are communicators, some of us are scientists, and I think the entrepreneurs and the people who start companies are a huge, huge piece of it. Because to be a successful company, you have to share the message and communicate it out, why you're doing what you're doing. So you're spreading the knowledge. So thank you both. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with? I just want to say, so I didn't really wrap my head around what you guys were doing until I went to your website, and you have a picture of the monitor and a picture of the cable and an arrow that says sunlight in here to the cable. That is very clear. And that's when the penny dropped for me. I'm like,
Nice.
oh, what?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad we had some amazing interns who really helped us up our game on the website and started us going on social media. Like that's not my forte, but we're trying hard. so yeah, I mean the education piece is huge. Our mission, alongside and in parallel to building a product that we believe in, that we have a mission and a passion behind, is really education. I mean, we really have to be the storytellers and, be the educators to raise awareness about the impacts that these devices that we all have to interact with are having on us. So, yeah, I mean, if for no other reason, than to just learn a little something here and there, join us on the ride. We'll try
Yeah.
to, keep putting blogs out and educational content. I mean, that's part of it too. We just want to, give people tools to help them heal and help them be able to survive in the digital world more in a healthier way.
Yes. And everybody, like, this is it. Everyone's like, oh, what's going to happen in the future? And if we have a tech dystopia, or if we have a chronic illness epidemic, or this or that. It's like, these are the moments, like right now, going to sign up for your newsletter to support a company that could potentially like transform the paradigm of screens in our lives.
Yeah.
Like, we all have agency here. We can all participate. Like, this is so fun and cool.
Yes, and thank you so much, Meredith, for your support. And you speak about these issues so eloquently, which we are just trying to learn to do, getting out of the academic silos. And so it's a very different communication style. And also here in this little conversation, you summarized what we were saying, especially what I was saying, so much better than we do. So there's a lot to learn for us. But till then, thank you so much for all the great work.
Oh, thanks, Peter. Thank you both. Thank you both for being here. And truly, yes, let's stay in touch. And anything we can do to support the evolution of this company, we're here for it.
Thank you so much, Meredith. It's been really
we'll
fun.
have you back soon.
All right.
Okay,
Sounds
bye.
great.
Thank you.
Take care.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.